Hey there, folks, my dudes, my fellow countrymen. This is the Screen Watching Podcast. It is a podcast that I have confirmation is more watched than that Miguel Markle TV series on Netflix the other week. Folks, this is going to be a very big podcast. We are taking a look at the new Apple TV Seth Rogen behind the scenes of Hollywood series, which means nobody's going to watch it. It's called The Studio. Simon's going to take a look at, did you know the Looney Tunes are back? Well, cinema goers didn't either because not a lot of people turned up, but it is in the cinemas. You can see the day the Earth blew up, and I think Simon's got some pretty enthusiastic words about it, but let's stick around and see what he says. We're also going to do the usual things. So what else have we been watching? Simon's looking at Oh Canada, which I'm assured stars one Richard Gere. Richard Gere, the man who my entire life I've looked to and thought, anytime Richard Gere's in a movie, that movie's for grown-ups. It's true. Something called A Working Man. Don't know, gonna find out. I suspect it's got Jason Statham in it, so obviously I'm very excited. And Adolescence, which is the oneer, and we'll discuss that in the context of The Studio as well. I'm gonna take a look at something which has just been dominating my TV screen. It's not new. Some of you have probably watched it. Other people may have been dismissive, and this is my opportunity to tell you, folks, you need to watch HBO's Industry. More on that cell later, and also I'm going to look at the last 7 days of adventures I've had at the cinema. Folks, this is the Screen Watching Podcast, and it kicks off in 5, 4, 3, I forget the rest of the numbers. See you soon.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Alright, Simon Foster, I've missed this, talking about the screen, talking about the movies, talking about the TV shows.
Hello, Dan Barrett. Hello, screen watchers everywhere. Not just the dudes and the blokes, but all the ladies as well who tune in. I know we've got quite the following amongst the ladies out there. So it's good to be talking. Yes.
I don't have a specific gender that I place on dudes. To me, anyone who exudes the nature of dude is a dude. It doesn't matter if you've got an innie, outie, or however else is positioned.
Or an outie. Wow, I didn't know. Wasn't sure that was going to happen. Yes, I've got a bunch of fun movies to talk about today. That's not entirely true, but I've got some interesting stuff to say. I hope you've had a good week, Dan Barrett. I've got to tell you very quickly. I had an unusual occurrence this week watching one of the Netflix shows. There's a 5-episode limited series, as Netflix have spoken about it, called the Gere Murders. I think it's a Norwegian show, maybe Finnish, somewhere with those, very pale people. They look like baby fish. You can see right through them. But in this one, we got to the end of the 3rd episode and everything was wrapped up. Like the plotting at all, we knew who the murderer was, the sort of tension between the cop and the new young cop. It sort of had a Mulder Scully sort of thing going on there. And we sort of looked at each other and went, why is there 2 more episodes of this? So we tuned in for the next 2 episodes, and it was a completely different 2-episode storyline. So what we figured out was that Netflix had purchased 2 made-for-TV movies out of the Scandi region, chopped it into what they called a 5-episode arc, and pulled a Swiftie on us.
It may not necessarily have been that Netflix cut it that way, but the production company may have chose to try to sell it internationally in a different format.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure there's different reasons for it to happen, but it's definitely pitched as a 5-episode limited series on Netflix called The Gere Murders. It's very good, don't get me wrong. I love my Nordic noir, my sort of murder mysteries, and it's quite gruesome in places, so it's got a real sort of sense of ickiness about it. But we were just caught a little bit off guard, and I'm wondering if anyone else has had that experience of content being chopped up like that.
What I would advise is that that's not entirely uncommon, and you often find that happens a lot with sort of murder mystery shows. Not a lot, but you certainly do come across it from time to time. But also there was a time period where, do you remember the olden days when everything was in black and white and sepia at times, and we watched shows like 24 and these big shows that lasted like 20 to 24 episodes a year.
Yep.
The thing about 24 very specifically, if you watch that, every 2 episodes would more or less be an arc. So it'd be Jack Bauer goes to the service station where there's a hostage situation. And then that would resolve at the end of 2 episodes. And then the next 2 episodes would be Jack Bauer lands a plane at an airport. So there'd always be the thing, but it'd always go over 2 episodes and it'd be the same director who is attached to both episodes. And I think that was just a production way of being able to limit costs and just make sure you got like a, 2 episodes may take, say, 2.5 weeks to film, but you don't have that sort of downtime of having to go to new locations, having to, bring in new crew and, all sorts of stuff that happens between episodes.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. Just caught me off guard. So there you go. There you go. Yeah. And you've been well otherwise. You did your own bit of television work. Somebody was watching you on their screens this week with a little dabble in the world of ABC News.
I was on ABC News. I also did so much radio during the week as well. I was on stations from as far as Alice Springs down to Adelaide.
Wow. That's
I really conquered that Central Australia sort of region. No, I did some news radio. I was, right around the place. And it's just because I wrote an article for the ABC site talking about the launch of Max and what the impact of that is in the local market. And I caught people's attention and I did a whole bunch of radio off it.
Did you get the whole makeup? Did you sit in the makeup chair? Did they put
Didn't
that
do
plastic?
The makeup.
They didn't make you up, really, with your skin.
But look,
Wow.
I know. Anyway, it was basically, they said, you know what, we're going to dedicate 10 minutes to the creature from the Black Lagoon, and they put me out there. No, so
right, well, it's good.
Fun little bit of trivia for anyone who may have stumbled across it. If you are thinking, hey, what was Dan thinking about while he's sitting across from the very handsome Joe O'Brien? What I was actually thinking about was I had a daycare situation that came up, which meant that I had to take my 3-year-old with me to the ABC. And I was just a bit concerned about the fact she was sitting out in the next room by herself.
By herself?
Oh, not by herself. There were some lovely people from the ABC who were hanging out with her. But,
Wow.
still
So
kind of
you
left her
won
and
in
said, Daddy's off to talk to Joe. You play your video game. And
Did she meet Bluey? Was Bluey anywhere to be found?
Well, I was hoping there might be some Bluey down in the foyer because I haven't
Some
been...
merch? There should have been some merch.
Well, down in the foyer at ABC in Sydney, in the Ultimo building, there's a section of the floor which has some large play school characters, like Big Ted's down there and a few other things.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of hope there might be some Bluey and Bingo action down there, but nothing.
Nothing.
And I haven't been into the building for about 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that used to be where the shop was, wasn't it? They had the ABC shop there, and that's all gone.
yeah, but the ABC shop's been gone since, well, before I moved to Sydney the first time.
Yeah, for
so well over a decade at this point, Simon.
Wow. How about that? Oh, well, I'm glad they saw the worth of your wisdom and put you on, what, like 11 o'clock in the morning or something?
It was at 5:40, I think. 5:40, 5:50, thereabouts.
In the morning? You went
No.
into there in the morning?
No, in the afternoon.
Oh,
I don't have,
okay.
I don't have a 3-year-old with me at 5 o'clock in the morning, Simon. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, the whole thing's kind of crazy. I don't know who I was
Wake
who I was
up.
talking to.
Daddy's got to talk TV to Joe.
Come on, we've got to get to Ultimo. Hurry. And you're
Anyway,
driving.
we've taken up too much time. We've got 3
This
minutes
has gone
now
on
for
long
reviews.
enough. Oh, great.
Simon Foster, let's dive right into a new Apple TV Plus show called The Studio.
Prestige films and box office hits, those are not mutually exclusive. We can do both and we will do both.
Matt, I get it. You want to make great art and make $1 billion doing it. Well, guess what? That never happens, and you're going to screw everything up trying to make it happen.
So Simon, there's a new TV show coming out of the US. It's called The Studio. I'm going to avoid doing a Studio reference. Not going to do it. This is a show that's got one Seth Rogen. You may be familiar with his work. He's there with a new show co-created with his usual guy, Evan Goldberg. And the two of them are skewering the Hollywood system in the United States. And the premise of this is Seth Rogen, he's a movie executive, and he doesn't really like what movies have become. They're all these big IP franchise films, and he wants to tell the stories that, drove cinema back in the day. He wants to get to the classic sort of American cinema of the 1970s. He wants to do that, but he's just been promoted to become the new studio chief, and so he's got to balance that thing of, I've got artistic ambition, no, we've got commercial realities, and how that squeezes him into a world that he doesn't want to be a part of. And we know that he doesn't want to be a part of that because the first episode is filled with countless moments of endless exposition where they talk about the fact that he loves older movies and wants to be a bit more artistic with his intent. Simon Foster, I don't know if you've seen this, but the reviews for this, actually, I do know that you have seen it.
I have seen it.
All the reviews coming out of the US, particularly from the trade publications, they love it. People are going crazy for this. Everyone I've spoken to in real life who've seen this do not care for it. Where do you fall on that? And once you let me know, we'll start diving into where I've got some issues with this series.
Okay. I enjoy a good Hollywood satire.
And you enjoy that because you watch a lot of movies and you spend a lot of time thinking about the industry. And
That's
at times
exactly
you
right.
dabble in the industry. Yeah.
That's exactly very true. Everything that they're taking down a notch in this TV show, I kind of get. The inner workings of the studios, the roles of the executives, the personal assistants, the makeup artists, the directors who are all a part of this takedown. And it's great to watch them on the screen, I must admit. I did have a good time with that part. What I didn't love about this was that, A, it's so frantic. It absolutely zings by. There's not a moment where the show breathes and allows a bit of sort of real world personality in there. Even to the point that it kind of...
it's genuinely funny to hear you saying that to me because that's usually my complaint with most of these.
Yeah, and it's... Yeah. The other thing I had was almost to the point of treading on their own laughs, because there are some funny moments that are raised, and the way the camera whirls around and the way Catherine Hahn and Ike Barinholtz sort of have their shtick ready as soon as Seth Rogen has finished saying something, kind of works against the cleverness of some of the stuff that's going on. So, look, I did like it. I think both you and I have had preview copies of this for quite some time, and I sort of binged the first few episodes, but I haven't gone back to finish it, which I think maybe says something.
Yeah, we have had them for some time. I watched the first 2 episodes and didn't continue on, and I literally had to go back this week and refresh my memory on what it was, because, I certainly remember that I didn't care for it much. For me, the problem isn't the frenetic camera work. For me, the big problem I have, and I'm going to be echoing very similar thoughts, I think, when we get to your film in just a short while. So look, Simon, the problem I've got with this one is the same problem I've got with The Day That the Earth Blew Up, which is that it feels a little bit like a production that is just out of time with the era that this is being made in. So, case in point, at the very beginning of this, we are seeing Seth Rogen's character being promoted to the top of the studio by the guy that owns the business. The guy that owns the business, played by Bryan Cranston, and it's always great to see Bryan Cranston on screen. Sure. Yeah, he's my favourite TV dentist. He is out there, probably not his best remembered role, but it's definitely the best one. Look, I'm not anti-dentite, just saying.
We can tell.
Yeah, so he's there, and he's dressed like Bob Evans, okay, being the 1970s Paramount studio head who was known for being sort of fairly flamboyant, and, suddenly he was a character back in the day. But, he's clearly dressed like Bob Evans, and anyone who kind of knows their movies and Hollywood, history, they're like, oh, they're doing Bob Evans. But also, it's 2025. Why is the head of the business, an homage to Bob Evans? There's so many colourful, interesting characters that have been flowing through the industry in the, 47 years since Bob Evans was really much of a presence. Why are you reliant on these old school tropes? And you get to, this idea that at the moment, there's a very big conversation happening about the fact they don't make movies and TV shows in Los Angeles anymore.
Sure.
All these studios, they're kind of half full and there's sort of stuff going on. But if you go to Atlanta, the studios out there are so much busier. There's so much happening in, Canada. People are traveling everywhere to make TV shows and movies. They're not doing it in Los Angeles. And there's this big push right now that needs to be going back. You're watching this, and they're just going around from set to set around Los Angeles, and it just kind of feels like it's a show from yesteryear. And if you're going to make a show which is a satire of the Hollywood industry, at least settle on when you're satirizing it. It doesn't seem like it's reflective of the studio industry.
Yeah, look, I'm going to not disagree with you. Yes, there are some very familiar elements of this which speak to a different kind of Hollywood, not necessarily an older Hollywood, because things change so quickly over there.
It kind of is an older Hollywood, though, Simon, because so much of this is about the fact that Seth Rogen's character doesn't want to make IP movies. That is the foundation of the show. But the area of Hollywood that they're satirizing isn't that. It's the same era that we saw, at least from The Player in 1992.
No, I disagree with that. I think that there's elements here that speak to the Hollywood that is today. And I mean, yes, they shoot in Canada and they shoot it.
What elements are they, except for the whole IP thing?
Well, that's a considerable part of it, because that's what's dominating Hollywood now. And the fact that they shoot in Canada and they shoot in Alabama, or they shoot in wherever, the decisions are all still greenlit. The studios are all based in Hollywood, so it's as much an LA satire as it is a Hollywood satire. So
yeah, but they're not going to shoots outside of Los Angeles, at least not in a couple of episodes I've seen.
Not in the 3 episodes I've seen. No, they're not. So Yeah, look, all of that is true to a certain extent. I think they still nail the politics and they nail the interactions of the executives at a top level pretty well. I think they know that the sandpit they're playing in particularly well after all their years in Hollywood, and that's kind of what they're working with, the boardrooms rather than the and they're dealing with the creative talent. Yeah, well, that whole thing was in the boardroom where they met. I see, it's been a while for me now. Where they met, wasn't Michael Sheen who was the main? Oh, Ron Howard. It was Ron Howard that they met in the boardroom. So look, I don't disagree with you wholly that it does seem like an older style of comedy, but I still think that is kind of what Hollywood is. I thought you were going to go down the path in that they're not mentioning. I'm
not saying it's an older style of comedy. I think it's a very modern comedy. I'm just saying that their targets are from yesteryear.
I thought your targeting was going to be that they're not referencing the streamers and they're not referencing the impact of, I guess because they're on Apple, I don't know if they can or can't do that, but they're not referencing Netflix or the Amazons or the Apples that are dominating Hollywood at the moment. That may come later.
Ted Sarandos appears as himself at some point in it. So the series certainly does lean towards that streaming.
As does Martin Scorsese, as does Charlize Theron. They've certainly got the names on board to pull this off as an insider's take on Hollywood.
The only thing that's enjoyable about this is the constant stream of well-known faces and faces that are of interest to people who are like passionate about movies. So if I put this down in front of, my wife or my parents, they probably don't know Sarah Polley at all. Mm-hmm. But certainly, if you're like into movies, you know who Sarah Polley is, and you know that she's been directing movies. Does she still act? I'm not sure.
Yeah, bits and pieces.
Yeah, but she's predominantly a film director these days, and she has a relationship with Seth Rogen going back to that Michelle Williams rom-com that she made back in like 2010 or somewhere thereabouts. So like there's clearly him leaning a lot of those relationships that he's got. Charlize Theron, obviously, he was in. Long Shot, I think was the name of that film.
Shot, yeah.
Yeah, so leans on that, but then also a whole bunch of other people that you know. That's the only thing I really liked about this. The episode that really... And look, this show can't necessarily be faulted for this. It just came out at the exact wrong time. Episode 2 of this is very much about what they're referring to as one-ers. So the idea of you've got a camera shot that ends up lasting for minutes on end, and at the very beginning, Seth Rogen's character is like, audiences love this, and the gimmick of the episode is that the entire episode is filmed as one shot. Okay? So you've got that, and it carries on, and the part of the problem is that this one-er that they're filming in it is supposed to run for, I think, 12 minutes they talk about it running for, and you see it run through a couple of times. But in the real-time aspect of the episode, it doesn't actually make sense. Like
you're doing the maths. You're doing the maths on this poor show.
I put a second and a half of thought into it. It just doesn't really make any sense in terms of actually being a one-er. The other thing that sort of hurts the episode, though, is that you watch it and you can tell where the edits are in the episode. Okay. And I did some further reading into it. There was some production issues in terms of the mansion they were using for it, and they only had like so much time in it, so they kind of had to shoot it in chunks over a number of days.
Yeah.
But they've got this thing talking about the beauty of the one-er. The entire gimmick is about one-ers. They don't film the episode as a one-er, even though it's presented that way. The same month that Netflix is suddenly getting all this adulation for Adolescence, which is 4 episodes, which were shot all in one take.
Stunning one-ers.
Yeah, and so if everybody's talking about that and everyone's super passionate about it, this suddenly comes out where they've done a fake version of it, and boy, it does not really feel right on screen.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I sort of got the deal that this was for the sake of comedy and that it wasn't particularly a one-er.
Yeah, but come on.
I thought the payoff for that was pretty funny as well. The Sarah Polley was very good at it.
This is my other problem. I don't think it's funny. I don't think any of the jokes land. I think that it is just... It's not biting enough to be funny. The jokes aren't targeted enough at anyone specific to be funny. It's just kind of it's kind of amusing. And I don't hate the show, but it is just not what it could be. And I do not understand the rave reviews for this one.
If we gave out scores, it would be like a 3 out of 10 for you and maybe a 6 or 7 out of 10 for me. That's probably where we're sitting.
Take your numbers and get them out of your damn mouth, Simon. I'm not putting ratings on this.
Oh, you went full Will Smith on me there. I felt the slap. All right, so that's the studio. It is on the Apple TV where both of you can see this. Are their numbers going up at all? Are they really losing that much money on the Apple stuff that came out through the week? $1 billion a year or something?
I think it's like 4 billion or something.
Oh, it's extraordinary.
What's a couple of billion? Look, I mean...
3.5 of that was Napoleon, though, let's face it.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is that all the streamers lost a large amount of money as they were trying to get into the industry. Okay, and it's not like Apple is short of the cash. Like, they are fine. It sort of is what it is. But there's lots of questions about what are they necessarily doing from a strategy perspective and where's this going. But that's a conversation for another time. I can't believe you even brought it up.
You know what they need to do? They need to reintroduce some legacy animated characters like Warner Brothers have done. The Day the Earth Blew Up is a new Looney Tunes movie. Let's have a look at the wacky trailer.
Looks like it's up to us to save the Earth.
Oh, it was nice knowing you guys. Now who gets what? Situation is under control. There's no way we could screw this up.
Buddy since birth, Daffy Duck and Porky Pig, with candy industry R&D executive Petunia Pig at their side, set out to save their childhood home, only to wind up travelling deep into space to also save the world from zombification-inducing sweet treats. I, as I believe you are as well, am a huge fan of the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes / Merry Melodies era. I honestly believe that Duck-a-Muck and Robin Hood Daffy are two of the greatest comedies that Hollywood has ever put out. You could add Duck Dodgers in there and any number of the Bugs Bunny or Porky Pig shows.
Before we go further, strong agree.
Strong agree. Good. So we're in the ballpark for this. Now, I am kind of aware of your thoughts on this. A, because you mentioned it through the studio stuff, and B, you touched on it in your newsletter through the week. Now,
well, I think I blatantly said what my issue was in the newsletter.
Yeah, my point with this is that I don't agree with you at all. I think that...
Simon, okay, first of all, people listening to this don't know what my contention was, so...
all right, well, go ahead and give us a spin on it.
Okay, well, do you want to talk about what you liked about the movie first? Before
I will, but I think it's in direct contrast.
Okay, well,
the point is that I think that they have brought on board some really strong new animation talent and voice talent and some design work that really does not only honour the original sort of wackiness and zaniness of Daffy Duck in particular. They've sort of reintroduced the woohoo woohoo sort of Daffy Duck that was very early in his life sort of animated life. But they've also sort of adapted some animation techniques. There's this extraordinary sequence where they go through the workings of a factory, and it sort of harkens back to Harold Lloyd's sort of comedy, where that famous one where he's going through the wheels of the machinery. And there's some other stuff that certainly hints at more Ren and Stimpy style of very modern animation, while all the time absolutely honouring the legacy that these two characters and the Warner Brothers animation through Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies has. So for me, I thought this was not only the perfect balance of old and new, but also very, very funny in parts. The bad guy, voiced by Peter McNichol, he's almost TV in the way that he's kind of not given a whole lot to do. And would have played better in a shorter version of this. They could have had a darker, nastier villain. And there's one sequence with the pink monster, chewing gum monster, that is amazing and sort of really takes this into big screen territory as well. I just thought this was very, very funny and wholly satisfying as someone who's grown up on the Looney Tunes Merry Melodies team.
So look, I don't disagree with what you said in that, one, I think that broadly there are some good laugh-out-loud jokes in this that are kind of funny. Okay, like actually funny. I shouldn't say kind of funny. That's not what I mean. I think there's funny jokes in this. I think that the relationship between Porky Pig and Daffy Duck, as it gets a bit further in, not so much at the very beginning, that kind of annoyed me a little bit. There was something about the animation style that just didn't quite sit right with the parental figure that they introduced into this to raise them from birth to the 12 years old that they're supposed to be, or whatever it is at the very beginning. Like, that bit didn't quite work for me, but, fine, I sort of moved on from that, and the rest of it is all pretty good. Where I have a problem with this is that if we think about what we love about Looney Tunes, which is that you got these really great iconic cartoons that you and I certainly grew up watching them as TV staples, okay, as part of the packaged Looney Tunes cartoons that we've seen on television since the mid-60s onwards.
Sure.
I joke about you being an exceptionally old, crusty, just old man that is about to disappear with the winds of time. But
You get it, yep.
you had the exact same experience as I did. You grew up
sure.
watching this as a cartoon package, the same way I did. These were produced as movie serials in a way that they went back to like some of these classic ones that you and I think of immediately when we're thinking about Looney Tunes are from like the early 1940s. They were played before movies and were just sort of part of the culture, eventually just repackaged for TV the way they lived on for
And remain timeless.
a couple of generations. Well, they don't remain timeless, which is kind of the problem. Okay, so I've watched like Looney Tunes cartoons like as a constant throughout my life. Okay, and so when I'm watching them, a lot of it is me sort of watching it with like my eyes. So I've grown up with these and I'm familiar with all the beats. Okay, but I wouldn't say that they're timeless. I would say that the episodes are very much rooted in the time that they were made. So you watch, you mentioned Duck Dodgers earlier, which is one of my all-time favorites. When you're watching that, all the iconography of all the space stuff is reflective of what you were seeing in 1950s, well, late 1940s, going into the 50s, space movies. Okay, you were seeing, like, it's the same sort of dopey costumes. It is a parody in the way that the studio doesn't. It spoke directly to the media of the time. Now, I watched that, and I grew up sort of enjoying that as a kid, but I was probably a little bit more connected to, like, that era of filmmaking when I was watching it than we are now, like, 35 plus years later, if I was watching it as a 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
These days, like, that is so far removed from the experience of seeing movies and TV shows set in space that it feels really anachronistic. It doesn't quite have that connection. My problem with this movie is that that movie was made very much by people of, you know, we'll say our vintage, who were making a movie saying, this is us making a classic Looney Tunes cartoon. And by all rights, they've succeeded at doing that. What they haven't succeeded in is updating Looney Tunes so it's more reflective of the media, the extra contextual elements in the world that these films were so good at doing when they were originally made. Instead, it's kind of just sort of trapped in amber, and we're just recreating that experience that we're finding from the amber. We're not adding anything new to it. And I don't mean that Daffy Duck should be out there getting a mobile phone out and then like buying and selling crypto, but maybe there should be jokes about crypto and those sorts of sales. Like maybe instead of thinking about a gum factory, okay, maybe it's an electric vehicle factory. Like it just kind of needs to be something with figures that you're making fun of. You think about Bugs Bunny. He was selling war bonds. He was engaging in stuff that was of the time and really sort of reflected what was going on. They were
in
things that were on the
instances. In specific instances, he was, and the duck was, and the pig was as well. But there were also classic cartoons. When you look at something like Duck and Muck, or when you're looking at something like Robin Hood Daffy, then they're just telling.
But Robin Hood Daffy was speaking of the Robin Hood films that were quite popular at the time.
Well, they're still totally recognisable today as satires of adventure stories. There's elements in there that have become.
It helps if you've grown up with all that, Simon.
First of all, I think you're undervaluing the intelligence in the audience able to recognise items that you call anachronistic or I might call vintage or antique or whatever. They're still ingrained in our cultural DNA as we move along. I don't think the people tuning in. I don't think the people that are tuning in to watch a Daffy Duck, Porky Pig cartoon are too worried about whether they're going to take down crypto or mobile phones or whatever it might be the example of the modern thing. There is some of that in this. But it doesn't get over. It's not the
target of it. It's like brief references. I'm saying that the old cartoons, like if you're thinking about, say, Foghorn Leghorn and characters like that, they are speaking to a type of Americana, which was certainly part of the cultural DNA of the time, but certainly isn't necessarily still around these days in the same way. It's society and culture have just moved on a little bit further than what's here. If we use like Robin Hood as an example, I'm not coming at this saying that Looney Tunes needs to speak to like the youngest kids, because that was never really ever true. Looney Tunes speaks so much more to adults as characters, and like the original serials that ran, but like the shorts that ran before movies, which we have seen repackaged, they were for adults. They weren't necessarily for kids. Certainly teenagers, like youngish teenagers onwards, would certainly appreciate it. But the jokes there were effectively the 1940s version of watching Family Guy today. Okay, they were skewering famous people and the culture and politicians, and all that was sort of mixed in. But these days, we're just kind of playing it more in terms of like nostalgia references to the world. It's not really speaking to the moment. And I really sort of got caught on a lot of the iconography. As good as the animation is, the visual style is still speaking, because this is very sort of space orientated, this film. It still speaks to that same visual look that we saw when Marvin Martian is fighting against Daffy or Bugs. Like, it's just not of the moment, and to me it's hugely problematic.
I don't think that's its role. I don't think that's the right, and certainly with the space stuff in this, it harkens back to, as you say, the Duck Dodgers era, but there are elements of it, certainly the things like the monster in this, I mean, then you start adding in elements like this is a single parent family, which they never would have had back in the day. There are nods in this movie that bring it into the current time and make it more relevant.
It's not enough, Simon. These are small little side aspects you're talking about. I'm saying that fundamentally this film is just tracked a little bit further behind than it should be. It's not speaking to the current moment.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it does enough for me with these legacy characters to make it relevant today. So there we go.
Yeah. Look, and also just the broader thing than just this. So if you think about Looney Tunes as a property, okay, I don't think there's really been a lot of relevance from Looney Tunes for, a couple of decades at this point. So I kind of feel like I'm the last generation that really was able to like appreciate sort of Looney Tunes and like the contextual sort of element that it is. So when I was 15 is when Space Jam came out. Okay, and Space Jam, I don't even want to think about that because I just think Space Jam is just terrible. Mm-hmm. But like since then, we've seen a couple of Looney Tunes cartoons coming out, which are half-hour packages of shorts coming through. None of them are particularly really that good. And the constant theme that I noticed with all of these, and I've seen quite a few of them, is that they really are speaking still to that same sort of visual cultural element. They don't want to necessarily move things on because you look at that going, oh, well, that doesn't feel like Looney Tunes because it's not kind of what it looked like in 1953.
That's the balancing act, yeah. Do you lose the old audience in winning over the new audience? I totally get that as a problem for the studio, and you're right. But like, they've introduced this to new generations with the Looney Tunes babies, whatever they were called, and when Amblin did a bit of work with it with Spielberg back in the.
Well, you're talking about Tiny Toons. So Tiny Toons was literally around when I was 12 years old. Actually, no, younger than that. It was like 1990, I think. So I was 10 years old.
Yep.
Like as I said, like I'm the last generation to really get like Looney Tunes characters, and even then, Tiny Toons aren't Looney Tunes. They had the Looney Tunes characters in it as teachers at Luniversity. Sorry, Acme Luniversity. I'd hate to get that wrong. But like this thing, I just don't think they've really done enough to keep it culturally current. And we've just kind of reached this period where if I'm the last generation to have really gotten it in a meaningful way, then that's a really big gap of time. And they've done nothing really to move things along, to evolve it. And we just reached this situation now where this movie comes out, and as good as it is, it doesn't quite hit the mark in feeling relevant to the modern moment. And I just sat there watching it, just a bit frustrated by the experience because I kind of wish this was doing what Looney Tunes was doing back in the day, which is being a contemporary, interesting, cultural, not an artifact, but relevant and thriving and breathing. But it doesn't. It's an artifact now.
It's in cinemas now, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. And as you mentioned, not released under the Warner Brothers Animation banner. It was produced by the team there and then picked up by Ketchup Entertainment, who are the same company that, as we record this, are negotiating for the Coyote versus Acme movie to finally find a home in cinemas. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Until then, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, is in cinemas right now. Dan Barrett.
Also, Simon, I never actually said that. We edited that part out of the podcast.
What part?
Where I said that Warner Brothers weren't distributing it anymore.
Okay. Well, now you can edit this part out of the podcast. You got a lot of
it's staying in there now. It's staying in. This is just the evidence that you don't know how an edit works.
I absolutely got no idea. What on earth have you been watching this week, Dan Barrett? Leading us to the new segment, What Have You Been Watching, Dan Barrett?
Sorry, is the segment What Have You Been Watching, Dan Barrett?
It is
doing
now
a separate segment for you there?
That's exactly right. I demand a sting as well. I want a sting for this part.
Yeah, again, evidence that you're not doing the edit.
What have you been watching?
Okay, look, I finally got around to watching Industry. This is an HBO show. 3 seasons in at this point. 4th season is on the horizon. I watched the first 2 episodes. It was fine. I wasn't crazy about them. I got distracted by the world. I never got back. for some reason decided to sit down like 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I'm like, I'm going to watch like Industry again. I'm gaga for it. I am so into this program. I think it is. Sorry, I'm going to use the word right now. It's really contemporary. It talks to. No, it's the premise. The premise of Industry is that it is young people who are working for a financial services firm in London.
Okay, yes. No, I was trying to think of an American show called Industry. No, of course, yes, I know the UK one. Yep.
Yeah, so it's HBO, but it's kind of a co-production with the BBC.
Yes.
And there's a few Americans in it, like Ken Leung is in there, but predominantly it's a British thing. But it's young people, there's a whole lot of drugs being taken, there is a lot of the sex, there is a lot of bare bums and other bits of stuff that's bare that you'll see regularly through this. It is a very edgy, youthy look at financial systems in a way that kind of feels just really, really honest. I don't know how accurate it entirely is if we're watching sort of the idea of financial services through the eyes of two people that used to work in it, but like 15 years later. I don't quite know exactly the creatives in terms of how old they are and what their, like, how current their connection is to it, but it feels right when you're watching it. Anyway, it's kind of, it's dramatically interesting. It's kind of funny at points. The cast on it are so magnetic. There is a reason why all the cast members of this are being cast in all sorts of things these days. There's a guy in it who's only in it for the first 3 seasons. His name's Harry something or other. I'm putting it out there. I've been thinking about this while watching it. He's going to be the next James Bond.
Wow.
I'm almost certain this is where they're going with this guy.
That is a big call.
He has just dropped out of... And look, it's a bit hard to really read too much into it because obviously there's a bit of a change in the James Bond ecosystem right now.
There is.
But he did just very purposefully leave Industry for some reason. Because he's not back for the 4th season.
I picked the next James Bond as being that guy who was in the nude with Emma Thompson a lot in that movie where they're up in the hotel room. And he was also one of the cops in the Bad Sisters TV series. He's got the blue eyes and he's a very strapping sort of...
An attractive man with blue eyes, you say?
Yeah, that'll narrow it down.
Who could this guy be?
Yeah, no, Daniel McCormick. Do I want to say that? Is that who it is? Probably something like that.
I know Australian actress Danielle McCormick.
McCormick, yeah. I think he's going to be the next Bond. And the longer it goes on, the longer the wait for the next Bond to be. Because I think the biggest gap we've ever had in Bond years is like 6 or 7 years before they relaunched, after the Timothy Dalton era, before they relaunched with Pierce Brosnan.
Coincidentally, is exactly how long that last movie felt.
So this is going to be the biggest gap ever between the Bonds, and there's not even a working script yet, so who knows?
So the guy you're talking about is Daryl McCormack.
Daryl McCormack, yes.
Yeah.
Fine, strapping young man who I think would make a great modern Bond. All right, so Industry is on the...
Sorry, you talked about him being from Bad Sisters and from... what else did you say? It was the Emma Thompson film, which is called Good Luck to You, Leo Grande.
That's the one, yes.
But most people would actually know him from Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders. Okay, so there you go. All right, so Industry, where do they watch it? How do I catch up with this show, which everyone is talking about because of all the bits and nudie bits, the bare bits?
So many bare bits. It is playing on, at the moment, it's the 28th of March, so you can find it on Binge, but from the 31st of March, you can find it over there on the Max.
I am going to jump into with a what else have you been watching now, and then you can rattle off your last 7 days of cinema adventures at the end. I'll run through these fairly quickly. Oh, Canada is in a few cinemas around town at the moment. This is the Paul Schrader directed film, which stars Richard Gere. They're re-teaming for the first time since American Gigolo back in, 79, 80, something like that. Richard Gere plays an ailing filmmaker who agrees to tell his life story directly to the camera. An ex-student of his, played by Michael Imperioli, agrees to film him. His beautiful wife, Emma, played by the beautiful Uma Thurman, again, reuniting with Richard Gere after Final Analysis all those years ago. And it's about the memories in a very fractured way, a very broken down way, as his mind begins to wander, as his age starts to catch up with him. Recollections become less linear, less easy to understand, which can at times make for a tough viewing experience watching this film. The flashbacks, Richard Gere is played by our own Jacob Elordi, who does a terrific job, sort of recreating a young man's ambition and also inexperience with life. But this is really Richard Gere's performance is extraordinary in this. I don't know. Once again, this is very much for an older audience. I don't know if I connected with this because at my age, you sort of go through the same sort of memories and is this what happened, and things are a little blurry. So I sort of understood the film language that this movie used, and I found it really moving and really beautiful. So it's called Oh Canada, and it's in selected theatres as we speak. Also,
how do they select them?
You go to the interweb and type in...
No, how do they select them?
Where the movie goes, where it plays?
Yeah.
I don't know, Dad. Don't get into your "this movie came out 6 months ago, it should have been out then" routine.
I wasn't doing any such thing. I'm just saying, you said they were selected cinemas. I'm asking, how did they select them?
Tell you what, they should have deselected a few of the cinemas that is screening A Working Man. It's everywhere at the moment.
Nice segue.
Oh, it's just a terrible film. This is Jason Statham. Now, I'm not against Jason Statham. I like his good action work. It's directed by David Ayer, who did Training Day that won Denzel Washington an Oscar. He did that furry movie with Brad Pitt in a tank. That was very good. But he also made The Beekeeper, which was Statham's last film, that I didn't mind, but was kind of crappy. In this one, Statham's very trademark, monotone, muscle man act. It really needs to be delivered, and it needs to be taken with a grain of salt, with everyone's tongue sort of firmly in their cheek. This movie is so earnest and so serious that it just knocks up against his sort of Easter Island facade. And Ayer just films this in the most, how could you say, not a throwback to 90s action cinema, because even they had a sense of humour about them and the best ones were watchable. This one's unwatchable for me. It's written by Sylvester Stallone. It's a boring, very bloated script. It's got the worst Russian gangster caricatures you've ever seen. It's got a sound mix where you can barely understand the dialogue, so I was grateful for that. Look, for me, the worst of the year list starts with A Working Man. This was a terrible, terrible film.
All right. I love a terrible movie.
Yeah, you'll love this one then. Finally, I just wanted to mention briefly Adolescence, which is breaking viewership records all across the Netflix at the moment. We binged this straight 4 hours of 40-odd minutes for each episode. Sorry, 4 episodes of 40 minutes each for episode. The way the story is told, as you alluded to earlier, in single take, or one-ers as the industry calls them, is amazingly staged. There are shots in this that I can't figure out how they've done, even with my sort of decades and decades, nearly a century of industry knowledge. I couldn't figure out how they pulled off some of these shots. On top of all, that would all mean nothing if the emotional impact wasn't there. The young boy whose name you've got in front of you there, you can read at any time. Stephen Graham is terrific in this. This is just like a really hard, emotional, raw story about a young boy, a murder, and what it means to be masculine in a working class in a modern society. And it's a really moving, really disturbing, and very powerful bit of television.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's not breaking records, but it is very highly watched. It's
breaking a few records.
Sorry, what records are they, Simon?
It broke the Sade record, that terrible music. That's a joke from
when Looney Tunes was relevant.
No, from the zombie movie. What was the one?
It's called Shaun of the Dead, Simon.
Shaun of the Dead, yeah, it was a funny joke.
Sorry, I don't want a movie explained to you.
All right, tell me about the 7 movies that you finally caught up with that have been around for 30 years.
Yeah, so this is what I've been doing. I've been going back watching those films that I've always meant to get around to. So, and also there's a couple of things I've just had to watch for, reasons. So something which is embarrassing I've never seen before, Simon, House of Games. I love Dave Mamet. I'd never seen the film.
Wow, okay. Yeah. What's the David Mamet one that you always rave about? You love...
Oh, which one? I'm raving about
you love your State and Maine. You love
State and Maine.
You love your Spartan. Spartan was a terrific film.
Spartan's pretty good. Red Belt. Love a bit of that.
Never saw Red Belt. Yeah, but House of Games, I love.
Heist is good.
Heist is the one that I was thinking of, yes. No, House of Games might have been one of the first ones of his that I saw, and I love House of Games.
It's the first film he directed, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of it's because my real aversion to Lindsay Krause.
Oh.
Just don't really... I don't know. It might be the haircut. Not sure what it is.
Jeez. Yes. But you loved?
It was quite good. I expected to love it more because I love most of his films, but that one, I got 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. So
okay. Yep.
So that's whatever it is. The Mean Season, which I'd never heard of before until I stumbled across it the other day. Do you know this film?
Is this the Kurt Russell, David
is.
Jordan one? Yeah, absolutely. I know this, where he plays the journalist who gets caught up in a serial killer's reign of terror in Miami. Yeah, no, I love this film.
Yeah, it's a firm 2.5 stars for me.
What? You're coming at these from the wrong point of view. These are Mean Seasons. Philip Borsis directed. No, not Philip Borsis. I can't remember who directed it, but he was.
Simon, it's fine. Time has moved on. It's okay.
Next.
It's okay. I finally got around seeing Black Bag, which is playing in cinemas now with Steven Soderbergh. Okay. Quite good. I really enjoyed it. 3.5 stars I gave it.
Yes,
whatever that means.
Yeah, that's good.
Includes star of industry, and I'm trying to look up her name right now, Marissa Abella.
Ah, wonderful. I mentioned her in my review of the film. She played Amy Winehouse in the Amy Winehouse biopic, which I am now going to watch, based on her work in Black Bag. I thought she was terrific.
You should watch her in industry. She's quite good.
Ah, do you get to see her bare bits, as you mentioned previously?
Simon, we're gentlemen.
You brought it up.
I'm just saying that it's in there. I'm not ogling. I'm not being gross about it. I'm just saying that if you're a red-blooded man or woman who likes seeing a bit of bits on screen, you're not going to be disappointed by it.
Okay, yeah.
But we don't need to talk about specific people and... Okay, I'm not going to say what I was about to say. I have seen parts of this movie before, but I'd never watched it from go to woe. It's a film starring one of my favourite actors. It's called The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Now we're talking, my friend.
Yeah.
Greatest movie ever.
And who is it that is my favourite star that I referenced there?
We had a back and forth through the week, and I didn't get what you were talking about, but I was quite amazed when you revealed to me that it is, in fact, Billy Vera of Billy Vera and the Beaters. Is that what it's called?
Correct.
As one of the Red Cavaliers, as one of the Buckaroo Banzai band members.
And, of course, we all love Billy Vera and the Beaters from their classic song, This Moment.
I'm assuming you're dropping in the play of it there?
No, as I said, you're not... I'm doing the edit on this one, Simon.
So, Buckaroo Banzai, I don't know if people know the film. It is a crazy film. Most people's careers survived it, not the director, W.D. Richter, who didn't do much else. He had Big Trouble in Little China. He wrote that for John Carpenter, and then that got him the gig to direct a film that he'd been trying to make most of his life called Buckaroo Banzai, and nobody got it except your faithful film reviewer here. I love this movie. I recently screened it as part of my science fiction film festival. Peter Weller, Ellen Barkin, Jeff Goldblum, Clancy Brown, John Lithgow,
Christopher Lloyd.
Doing the great John Lithgow in this. Christopher Lloyd, of course, Dan Hedaya. The cast goes on forever.
Clancy Brown, Carl Lumbly.
Yeah, all good stuff.
Vincent Schiavelli.
The way you said that, I was like...
Jonathan Banks.
Yeah, Jonathan Banks briefly in there. Very exciting. Good to see. Ellen Barkin was so beautiful in this. Did you love, or somewhere in between?
I really like elements of it. I think that the movie starts to lose a bit of steam about 2/3 of the way through and kind of just goes through the motions a bit. It loses a lot of the fun... I don't want to say zaniness because it cheapens it. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a energy which is sapped by the end of the movie.
Right.
Okay, but it wins it right back with the closing title sequence, which is admittedly the first thing I ever saw from this movie. I woke up in the middle of the night once on the couch, and it was literally just as this movie was finishing up, and I got to see those closing credits, and indelibly became part of me from that point in.
And for everyone's enjoyment, here's Dan dropping it into this part of the podcast.
I probably will drop it in here.
Oh, nice.
How could I not?
How could you not? And what else have you been watching?
I will say, sorry, with that closing credit sequence, my daughter came in as I was watching that final moment, and she heard the music playing, and she just started dancing in the lounge room. And so we watched that final sequence about 5 or 6 times on repeat because she was into it. And then we played the closing sequence from The Life Aquatic, which is a very deliberate homage to the end of Buckaroo Banzai, and she loved that as well.
Oh, that's a nice moment. Buckaroo Banzai bringing families together since 1984.
And tearing them apart in that same time period. Again, something else I hadn't seen from Go to Woe before, but had certainly seen in parts. I may have seen it once before, I'm not sure. Michael Clayton, which is fantastic.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And then also I saw RKO 281, which is a really great TV movie about the making of Citizen Kane, which is a very popular movie.
Yes, it is a very popular film. Did you give that 2.5 stars on Letterboxd as well, did you?
It's better than Mank.
Oh, my God.
It is.
Well, yeah, my God, hasn't that been forgotten? Have you ever seen Citizen Kane?
Dude, come on.
Have you ever? A lot of people haven't.
No, I've watched this so many times. We've talked about it a whole bunch of times.
Have we really? Okay.
We have. We really have. No,
Wow.
I'm a big Orson Welles guy. So
You are. You love your Ambersons.
Yep.
All right.
Love the Citizen Kane. So I watched that, and then also I did watch another film called Extreme Prejudice, which is a way for us to segue out of this Simon.
Yes, it's a beautiful segue because that leads us into promoting Best Movie Year 1987, which is our other podcast that we do where we're working through 100 films from the year 1987 to determine if it is in fact the best movie year ever. And we're about to record the Extreme Prejudice episode thereof.
Indeed. Anyway, folks, if you want to track us down, do so. I recommend Harpoons and Nets. If you want to find us on the internet, you can check out Simon's email newsletter. It's called
Screen Space. In fact, if you just go to Substack, you'll find most of what we do there, won't you? That's where we're spending a lot of our time at the moment. Screen Space, subscribe. You'll get a weekly newsletter and a few other bits and pieces. And where are you now, Daniel?
Same place I've always been, Simon. It is a website. It's called Always Be Watching. Find it at alwaysbewatching.com. It's on the internet. It's a newsletter that arrives in your inbox. You'll find news stories there about TV, streaming, a little bit about film and video games, or anything else that you find on a screen.
Let's wrap this up, my friend. We've got a podcast to record.
Okay, folks, it's been real. We'll see you next week.